Welcome to the Sisters interview for May 19th. I am Rithkin from Ontier, and my co-host is my sister Aishaksi, also from Ontier. And tonight we are very blessed, I guess is a good word, to have Sir Justin de Leon on, also from Ontier, and various other kingdoms. He's a court baron, a knight. He has about every thank you from royals that you could possibly imagine. He's been instrumental in so many reigns, and he's been really a sounding board for so many royals. So I'm very excited to talk to you because your brain works in this wonderful way that I appreciate. So welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we usually start these with your SCA origin story. So why don't you start us there?
Okay, it's a little long, if you don't mind. I will, so I started off, I grew up in kind of a Hindu commune, and we owned a bakery, operated a bakery called Rudy's in Boulder, Colorado. And we sold bread and that kind of thing, right, obviously. But we also sold cookies and brownies and things like that. And one year we went to the People's Fair in Denver in 1982. And I was there, and I was selling brownies and cookies. My mom came up and was like, Van, you need to go see these people. And I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, well, why don't you just set this stuff down? You can go over there. And I went over, and I looked, and I went, holy cow, there's all these people there in medieval clothes. And I was really into, Tolkien and, Knights of the Round Table and that sort of thing, not to mention, a number of various Indian characters and stories like the Ramayana and things like that, which are all hero epics as well. Anyway, the next day we were still doing things at this fair. And so I put the clothes I'd worn from that Halloween on, which happened to be this mock-up of Thranduil of Mirkwood's outfit from the animated Hobbit from the early 80s. And so I showed up, and people are like talking to me, and they're like, oh, and I'm like, I'm brand new. And they're like, cool, you've got a very clear voice. And I was like, well, I do children's chorale and stuff like that. And they're like, oh, well, you should come and try and herald for us. And I'm like, what? And so literally at this demo, never done a thing with the SCA, right? And I went and did heralding on the field, and I saw, people fighting, and the Baron at the time was Baron Theodoric ap Brecon Beacon, who was in Cairta, which is Denver, and the Baroness was Morgana. And subsequent to that, I went to my very first event, which was Grand Outlandish. I think it was about 3 weeks later. My mom said, oh, they seemed cool, you should go with them. Now, mind you, it's the early 80s and my mom's a hippie, so me just randomly driving off to like another state with people probably seemed perfectly fine to her.
And how old were you?
12.
Oh my God.
Yeah, but so that would have been my first SCA event, which was Grand Outlandish. But I actually did this, this demo at the Capitol Hill People's Fair in Denver first, and that first event was really magical. I went and did heralding and everything else, but there was a Countess Shalea of the Whispering Pine, and she held a chivalry contest for everyone on the site, right? And unfortunately, she used me to shame everybody else there, because she calls me up, right, and says, we've decided that you were definitely the most chivalrous person on the site for the entire event, and all of these things, right? But then she says, which is a lesson to everyone else that someone new can be. I was like, oh. But yeah, no, I remember those days really fondly. I was a very small kid, though, by comparison to now. So.
Yeah, that was, I'm assuming, pretty minor waiver.
Oh, as far as I know, certainly there wasn't one filled out that I recall.
So did you know the people that you went to Grand Outlandish with? Or?
I knew them through the demo, and had talked to them. Greg and Corinne Robinson was their name. Catone the Mercenary, and I'm forgetting Corinne's name. I think it was Corinne, but but anyway, they were part of a house back then called the Voided Sun, and we all went and yeah, that was a thing. It was an experience. I was not at all prepared. I was prepared for Boy Scout camping, which I had done some of, right? But I was not at all prepared for doing things in the SCA. I had like all of my Boy Scout camping gear to cook with and everything, and like dried rations and stuff. Everybody's eating real food. I'm like, this is really confusing.
So did those people continue to sort of foster you, or?
They did for a while. Unfortunately, they ended up departing the area a while later, but I connected with other people at that first event, and also spending time in that area in Cairta and Cairgalen, which is Boulder. I got taken in by a lot of people. I was a kid, right? So it was a thing. There was Baroness Catherine Lynette Holford, and her husband at the time was Nicholas DeCane, and a number of other people. Mistress Beatrice made my first Cavalier garb that I wore, which was really pretty, and magenta and black stripes. That was like 1984 or 5, yeah.
Wow. So did you learn to sew for yourself?
I did eventually. So the first, like I said, the very first time I went, I wore a costume that was put together with some friends of mine and I from this mock-up of the Hobbit thing. But then, my friends, the Laurels especially, were like, you really need to learn to do this yourself, and they started, as they were cutting things out, they'd show me, this is how you draft a sleeve, or, this is how your sleeves are supposed to look, or they didn't look, right? Like I'd say, well, so sleeves are supposed to be curved, and they're like, no, not in this period, they're flat, or, various kinds of seams and sewing. And I can sew now, although my hand sewing's always been super weak, but, I can do it now. And that was a nice thing, then was that opportunity to actually have the opportunity to engage with people and learn, some skills that I didn't have before at all. So.
Did you sort of stick with focusing on heraldry, or what other things sort of?
So because I was so young, I couldn't really, fighting. There were fighters and fencers in the community of people that I was spending time with originally, and fighting was further away, which is really funny. I couldn't do it till I was 18 because nobody would let me. Right. However, Sean, who I actually knew, vaguely back then, was fighting at 16, and I didn't know that until like very recently, and I was like, oh, yeah. Because I fenced when I turned 16, which was okay then, doing rapier, which was not done with schlagers or anything. It was still épées back then, and occasionally saber. And I did that for, about 4 or 5 years, and then picked up heavy in, oddly enough, when I was living in Meridies going to college. So, but yeah, mostly heraldry, field work, a little bit of marshaling when it was possible. You're just holding a staff at the side of the field. There were some questions about that. Whether that was legal.
So when did you go to Meridies? What's the story behind that?
So when I was, must have been 19, went down there, eventually ended up at school at Mississippi State University. And originally the reason was I wanted to go and study biology there to become a veterinarian. They were willing to give me a scholarship. And then I found out I didn't like killing animals at all. Not even that much. And And so that quickly ended. But I was down there for a while. You know, I was living in the area at that point because I'd moved down there to go to school. And then, you know, I had friends that lived down there. And so pardon me, the group was the Shire at the time. I don't know that it still has the same name. It's the Shire of Riviere de Sang in Starkville, Mississippi, where Mississippi State University is. And there was a bunch of people there. In fact, strangely enough, I think I maybe was the last person knighted, you know, of the group of them. And I think only two of the people that I'm familiar with who are practicing regularly aren't royal peers now. So that's sort of bizarre. There's Duke Kalin and Duke Lorik from Glenavon. And then Count Vernerus, who lives, I think, in Arkansas, the Arkansas part of Glenavon now. Casimir was you know, who now lives up here, as well as Sir Kane, who lives up here now. Yeah, we're all people in that practice, strangely enough.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a small world.
Yeah, it's tiny. It was really weird when I ran into Kane the first time at an event up here. I was like, yeah.
Did you have a knight that you trained with down there, or was it sort of
Down there, no. When I went back to the Outlands, and that was in 93, I believe, 93, 94, somewhere in there. I worked with knights in my immediate area, but I was squired for a time to Giovanni di Siena. He's a count now. And our relationship, you know, frankly, it ended primarily through, you know, it was my fault. I'll put it that way. I was being flaky and that it just didn't work out. But but then around, you know, just a few years later, you know, we were working together and doing all these things, fighting. But then I became involved with a woman who's now my ex-wife, and we had children, and they were twins, and there was no more really time, resources for, you know, doing a lot of things in the SC. I was still fighting, but I couldn't devote as much time to it as I had originally intended. And then, well, if I keep going, then 2000 hit, and that's when I moved up here, right? Well, 99. And then in 2000, I had head surgery, brain surgery, both in the same year. And then I was inactive off and on for the better part of 8 years. Is that too much information?
No, that's great. It's your story. That's what we're here for. So what brought you back into the SCA after your recovery period?
Oh, well, so you know, to a large extent, I grew up in it, right? I mean, you know, admittedly, I was 12 when I joined, but, you know, I got my AOA when I turned 18. And that was, you know, it was funny. They wouldn't give it to me before that. And that's what they all told me. Like, the king and queen actually told me that, right? You know, like, they were from my area, and I was like, okay, this is interesting. But you know, the ideals, right, behind the organization, the commitment to certain concepts revolving around ideas of chivalry and improving the self, and also, you know, I mean, frankly, the history, you know, and the enjoyment of going to these events and, you know, dressing in clothes and fighting and all the rest of it. You know, I mean, I just missed it. I missed it a lot.
So how did you get back in?
So so in 2000, right, I had the surgery, which was a serious barrier because they severed my left vestibular nerve, Your vestibular nerves control balance, and so it, there was an issue of not just physical rehabilitation in the sense of walking and all of that, which was problematic for a relatively brief period of time. But I thought, well, I'll try to get back in quickly, right? I put my helmet on and literally fell over. It was just like, nope. Anytime my head went slightly off balance, my body simply was incapable of compensating for the weight of the helmet. And it was disheartening, but I set it aside for a while. And then went out, eventually went out east to Eastern Washington, went to Eastern Washington University for a while. Then I really wanted to get active. I started trying to get back in armor, put my helmet on, literally ran around, seeing what would happen if I put it on and like moved my head around and ducked and bobbed and weaved and did all these things, and I was okay. I was like, oh, this is great, but it took a while to get armor back, and then I eventually got it. And I'd been going to events in the meantime. I just was staying really low key. I had a modern tent, was way out at the edges of things, went to 3 or 4 events a year, for that whole period of time. And then when I got back in armor, Einar, who I owe a great deal, started talking to me, and he wanted to talk to me about some kind of relationship, and I was in a situation where I was ready to move. I was in a very fluid position, so I spoke to him, and eventually I moved down to where I live now, which is Vancouver, Washington, and Strong Guard. And not after just short of a year of being his man at arms, I became his squire, and then met everyone else in the family, which was a great experience. That's one of the things that connecting to Einar personally, and with his then wife Guline, both it was a really good experience. But in addition, getting to meet Ulfred and Optimus and Bane and all the other knights that are in the family was just a and people was a great experience, and they were really good, very supportive, very focused on helping each other, and really training someone to be I think in a lot of ways really be what we want SCA Knights to be.
Yeah, I think it's a group of people that actually do train and have trained for a while, instead of just the School of Hard Knocks or whatever.
Right.
I don't know how to put that.
Well, sometimes pain is used as a tool for training, and it's probably it's a very dull and not particularly useful tool, and some people do it, but my impression was that they were much more focused on really trying to show proper technique, and talk about footwork, and talk about how force works with the sword, and et cetera, et cetera.
And that you have a very analytical mind that probably really appealed to you.
It does. I'm analytical. A lot of it is a result of spending time in my head, so to speak. I tend to be kind of cautious about some things. Part of it is an innate desire to not break things, so to speak, right? When I talk, I try to think about it And so when I'm fighting, right, it sometimes, it does. It comes. I've had people say, "You seem so focused and smooth, and it's kind of intimidating." And I'm like, "Yeah, not from my side. Let me tell you." Yeah.
So how long were you squire to Ironar?
So let's see. I was knighted in 2013. So a little over 3 years, I think. Yeah. And it was a good experience. I mean, he's a very good man. He in many respects. He is he's former military and can be a little old school, at times, but he really does care, and he does have a commitment, a heart to wanting to try to do the right thing, right? And as so many people do, people have failings and strengths, and his strength is his loyalty, and I think the love he has for the people who are close to him. And he can be a bit, prickly to people who aren't sometimes. So
it's a human thing.
It is. It's very human.
Yeah. So, I mean, I know you've been playing forever and you've been fighting a very long time, but like 3 years as a squire, that seems pretty short. Did it feel short to you?
It did, but only in the sense that there were a lot of events during that period, right? I really committed myself really hard. In fact, I kind of broke myself at one point, because I was practicing Mondays in
Portland.
Thank you. Yes, in Portland, that city there, and then Thursdays here in Vancouver, and then I was going like on the weekends to events and tournaments, and I was going to tournaments, in various places around the kingdom. Einar and I were going, or members of the family would get together, and we'd, go in trucks together or whatever. And so there were a lot of events. I mean, I know one year I did something like 42 or something events. It was, when you consider it, it was so many events that it doesn't seem like it was short, right? The other thing is, I had, like you said, I'd been in the SCA for a very long time, right? So to an extent, it was a lot about, introducing myself to the culture here, introducing myself to the way the fighting works here, right? And really learning and polishing, skills that I had some basis for, right? And that's one of the things, again, that I think was super valuable about, the people in this area was, there was a desire, to really help with that, from everyone. And I was also pointed in the right direction by people, I started serving the crown, working on retinues as a guard, just a lot of it, I did because I wanted to understand, right? I wanted to understand the people who were on the throne. I wanted to understand the culture of the kingdom better than I previously understood it. When I first came here, I actually was living in what is now Thornwood, Shithamwood then, Bellingham, Washington. And I did some things, some events, and I got a feel for some of the people, but I didn't have a really deep appreciation for a lot of the culture and the history in Untitled at the time. I mean, I met the Kendalls, when they were sitting on the throne in Lionsgate, amazing people. And I enjoyed the I enjoyed it. And I became I was the first bardic champion for the region that became eventually the Principality of Thierry. And I was also I was a signatory to their first treaty. But part of that was I was just doing it from the perspective, my personal perspective, which has always been that I have a feeling that the more pageantry, the more opportunities there are for people to, participate in all of that, the better I think the society would be, right? So I've always felt that like all of the areas of the SCA should probably fall within principalities, which is just my opinion. But that was what I was trying to push towards, was my personal opinion, not understanding necessarily the culture here at all. So, that was one of the things I wanted to do, was really get to know people, get to know, Thorin and Dagmar, for example, I think were the first king and queen that I served after I came back. And, and they were, it was really neat, especially with all the history Thorin has,
Definitely.
Loopy says, not to worry, that someone will win coronet for you and you will be a royal peer too. That's Dagmar. Sorry, I used a mundane nickname.
Thanks, Dagmar.
So, was it a big change for you from Outlands culture to Ontir culture?
It was in some respects. I mean, so Colorado's culture is different than Washington's culture, right? And then you add to that the Outlands came out of Atenvelt, right? Which had a distinctly different culture around the crown and fighting and its involvement, for example, with Estrella, right? It's a big war that we were deeply involved in, in the mid '90s, certainly. When I was most active and most involved. Even though I had been in for quite a while by that time, my ability to travel outside the area was much more limited. But by the mid '90s, we were that was a major part of the culture, and we had war practices in the north and south of the kingdom, and there was this big focus every year. You're going to go to Estrella. You represent the kingdom, right? And that's much more absent here. Obviously there's Ontir West War, and there's the border war with Artemisia, but they don't define the culture as much as Estrella did for the Outlands then. And the fighting styles were quite a bit different as well. For example, Madus, really popular in the Outlands, right? Quite popular. Not so much up here. The center grip round shields were really quite rare, if even existing. I honestly don't remember anyone using one until I came up here. And there are other things, some of the, with regards to fighting. And then there was just I'm not sure entirely what it is, but the level of the artisans in this area when I first came up here were much. Well, I'm going to insult all of my friends that are Laurels in the Outlands, and I'm sorry. They were much more accomplished in individual cases than in the Outlands where I'd come from. In that, Duchess Lau, for example, looking at a lot of her stuff, and various other people I was interacting with, I was really the culture of art was much more developed, I think.
Lau and Ludwiga and Laurelin and those kind of people set a pretty high bar and sort of lead by example. So I agree, like the standard is very high in our kingdom.
Yeah.
And we're all desperately trying to catch up.
Still.
Yeah.
Well, it was just kind of a shock. I mean, I'm not going to say that we were like all in nylon tents or anything, but it was not quite as developed. It was much more much different in that regard. And the that's another thing. There was no drumming up here when I first came up here,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that was a big thing in the Outlands. The drumming and belly dancing culture was huge when I was coming up in the SCA. There were two Laurels in Cairgalen, Boulder, where I mostly grew up. David Shmuel, Sir David Shmuel Ben Rachon, and he was a really accomplished professional drummer. And then there was Billy Woods, who was Master Sylvanus, and he was likewise a really good drummer. And I am kidding you not. People would bring drums, and they would demand that you be able to at least play like certain basic rhythms, right? And then you just do that. We'll do the solo stuff over it. So, you partook of the culture. I brought drums like 2 or 3 times to my first events, Middle Eastern drums, and no one played them. And I was like, well, guess I'll just retire my drums. So,
I think it's one of Antier's big lacks. We did at some point have drumming and dancing, but I don't know what.
There's a handful of people that I've run into that still do it, but it's certainly not, as in my experience anyways, not as much a part of the culture as it was where I lived before.
Yeah, it's definitely not part of the mainstream culture, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, it's neat. I think it adds a very diverse element in the sense that it's not part of what we think of as European culture, right, as much. And so it's very welcoming in some respects as a result to the idea of the world being a more global experience in the pre-17th century SCA. Now, admittedly, you have all the problems around, potentially cultural appropriation and all of those sorts of things. But at the same time, if you don't have any elements of it, you almost end up erasing these very important cultures, these very important, people that existed during that period. Because, one of the things I saw a lecture recently, and one of the things the history professor said is the unfortunate side of our focus on Europeanness, right, in medieval studies, is the fact that it's almost like the Middle Ages didn't occur anywhere except in Europe, right? Which is to say that it's not exclusionary in that sense. It's just it's saying that like nothing else happened in the world, and it's like there are all sorts of things happening in the world, happening during that period. We're just not very familiar with them. So.
Yeah, Dagmar commented something that I was thinking. I think one of the reasons we don't have a lot of drumming is that a lot of our sites are close in to residential areas, and we have quiet time after.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
That's no fun for anyone.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
Yeah,
it's a very good point.
For sure. Are we ready to look at pictures?
Sure.
Oh boy.
Are we? There we
go. That is Gulf Wars 1995. That is, you can't really see it, but my arms are ghouls, a winged lion, sagrient, flying rampant, right? And suns around it. And so those are the suns. But I decided for some reason, it was the mid-90s maybe, I don't know, to do something to my hair and texture it. As you can see, it's not normally quite that wavy.
I was just thinking, I was looking at you and I'm like, wow, did you straighten your hair, or is it?
No, that's me trying to be stylish in the mid-90s, I think. I went to the so if people aren't aware, by the way, Gulf Wars was not originally held in March. It was originally held in June. I went to the first couple, and those were terrible.
Why?
They were great events, but the heat was absurd.
Okay.
I tell this story, to people, but there was a Sir Forgall in Atlantia who was there, and he had brought. I think he was a trainer at a U.S. military base. He was a sergeant, as I recall, and I was sitting there, and I was wearing this really very heavy black breastplate, and I was sitting there, and he looked at me, and he said something to the equivalent of, "Son, you should have a seat." And I said, "What?" And he said, "No, you need to have a seat right now." And about 5 seconds later, I'd certainly had a seat because I collapsed from heat prostration, so heat exhaustion. So, yeah. But that was a heck of a thing. But that was a good year. 95 was fun. I was seeing old friends and going back and yeah. That was Estrella, either 95 or 96. I'm pretty sure it's 96. And that was, so the thing that I remember best about that year, not this photo, because I don't remember the photo very well, but the whole Outlands army and all of our allies got woad painted by a guy with real woad at the beginning of the battle. But the other thing was, it was the reign of, it was like the 5th reign for Arton, Duke Arton. And he was proclaimed a Strelicus at the war by the army. There were some really fun and epic things, you know, on the fighting field during that particular war. And yeah, we proclaimed him a Strelicus, emperor of the event, I guess, sort of.
Okay, so I'm gonna just try to back.
Well, that's my knighting.
Yep, we're not gonna talk about these until I get to where I want to be. So.
Okay.
Okay, now we can talk.
All right, this is me just modeling a look outside my apartment in Cheney, Washington. I had a sword. I went, I wonder what it'll look like with the armor. This is the new armor I got in 2008 or 9. I still can't remember what year it was. Yeah, it didn't work out. It was, there were some mechanical problems with the manufacturer and yeah, anyway.
Pretty.
It looked nice. That is Penzic War, 1994, I think. And we are setting up the main mast of what we called the Tiger Shark. It was a ship, and we were setting up the main mast, and yeah, but it's first days of Penzic, probably right after the land grab.
I'm trying to figure out which one is you, and I cannot.
I don't know if I'm in that photo or not. There are other photos during that sequence that are me, but I'm not sure I'm actually in that particular one.
This is the only one you were tagged in, so.
Yeah, that's fine. I recognize the photo.
Okay. So confusing. Okay, and then we get into your knighting.
Okay. That's my knighting scroll.
Oh,
wait. Oh, there's one of my daughters. That's Catherine.
Okay, here we go. Sorry, I've got my act together now. This is your knighting scroll.
You're fine. You're fine.
Okay.
So you can see my arms there. You can see the whole thing. There's some things about this that actually I really, when I was talking to the person who did it, she and I spoke, and I wanted some elements included. So you'll note that, like, it's got the Gute song, which, you know, service is very important to me, and so that's on there. Has a representation in the lower right-hand corner of Einar and I, right? Sure. And then it has the Black Lion of Antir and the White Stag of the Outlands on it, right? And then that in the lower left-hand corner is a representation of my very first SCA event, where I got the Chivalry Award. I don't remember how that ended up stuck in there. I must have mentioned it, and they thought it was really neat, so they put it in there. And then in the midsection on the right are, I believe it's crossed rapiers, talking about, you know, indicating that I was a fencer for a period of time. And then it has the Star of Thierry over on the left. It was supposed to be a representation anyway of the Star of Thierry, since I was the Bardic champion of the area. And yeah, so it's got some neat little elements in it.
And there's some close-up of some of the elements later, so we can.
That is obviously my knighting ceremony. That's my daughter, Catherine, in the front, and her twin sisters hiding behind the shield there, Erin. And then my lady, Marion, also Erin, is behind her, where you can see the edge of her cloak in the scene. And I'm wearing, we decided for my ceremony, I cut my hair. I had it cut, way back from where it normally was. And I bathed ritually as much as we could. The tub, unfortunately, didn't make it. I don't remember why anymore. And the clothes I wore were specifically taken from the tradition of that Lull and de Charny talk about, as well as I think the Ordine de Chevalerie may mention as well, which is that I'm wearing black hose, brown shoes, a red tunic over a white undertunic, cloak with red, all symbolic elements.
I did the same thing, the white and red and brown.
Yeah. And that's me preparing to have my haircut before my vigil. And you can see, actually, that's where the banners there, were made by Mr. Zula. And there's my arms, and then there's elements of Meridies with the black and white with the star, and then the embattled green and yellow of the Outlands and the Chequy of Antir on it. But that's Bane's tent in the background, which is an amazing prop, so to speak. That's Ulfred. Hello, Ulfred. Ulfred gave me the lineage chain. Well, the various knights of the family. I wore the chain that many of us have worn, and he did something kind of funny. Einar had a duplicate chain made, right? So he didn't lose the important one, right? Well, Ulfred, I think, thought that was a little bit of a cheat. So he took one of his original links and attached it to the chain, right? And so I had to be responsible for that specific chain, when it was handed to me. Oh, okay. That's a little bit of an inside joke with Daphne and I. It's a rainbow cord, right? And a star or a sun, right? And there's my mundane name, almost ended up being Rainbow Star when I was little. So.
And these were tokens for your knighting? They
were tokens given out at the knighting. Yep. Thank you, Daphne, if you're watching.
Very cool.
And then this is the vigil space that I had. And that's my helmet, which recently was refurbished. I had to have it refurbished. It was a really good space. The site itself can roast forever in infamy. It's a terrible site.
That was like the dead Vol site, right?
Yes, that. Yeah.
It was not the dead small rodents event.
No.
This was the unfortunate drunken Duke event.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
I will tell you a funny bit about the Vol version of that event site, though. It was I have my dog Sheba, right, and she's at the time, well, now she's 13 or approaching 13 and getting a lot slower, but she's very quick and loves to kill anything that's small and moves fast. Doesn't move fast enough, and so everybody was talking about all these voles, and and everyone in the camp was like, I don't know what's the deal? We haven't seen any voles. And then we were watching Sheba at one point. We just saw her just jumping, snatching things in her jaws, shaking her head, and then jumping to the next thing and snapping. It was just like, oh, that's why we don't see any voles. Yeah.
Yeah, we that was a hard site to have a toddler at. I'm just gonna leave it.
I can imagine. That was a rough site.
Oh, it was
Yeah.
I remember Lily was a toddler at that site and she was sick and it was awful.
Oh,
yeah.
Well, walking around that site's actually difficult. That's what's amazing.
We're looking at your helmet right now.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit, because it's gorgeous. I mean, your helmet is so beautiful.
Thank you.
Can you talk a little bit about what inspired you to go that way with your kid?
Yeah. So it's based on, it's inspired by the frieze on the what's it called? The Basilica of Saint Justina in Padua. That was incidental, by the way. I liked the art, and then it turned out it was Saint Justina, and I was like, oh, well, that's sort of yeah. But there's a frieze that was carved, or carved and placed on it in the very early 13th century. They think it was probably somewhere between 1205 and 1215, right? Which is right in the era of my persona, primarily. And so Ugo and I are friends. Thank you, Ugo and Bryn, both of you, for this wonderful helmet. And he thought it would be really neat to work on it and make something out of it. And so the original faceplate was smooth with some holes in it, right? But what he did was Ugo decided to go ahead and carve into what's actually 1/4 inch steel these winged lions, and they're actually sculpted into the metal, and they are and then it's tool hardened, and the band around it is actually various saints. You can't really see it. I wish I could have gotten you up close. It's like they're different saints around the edge.
I have close-ups of this for Vren's interview. Like we showed them in his interview. Yeah? I've got him in a folder on my computer.
Okay.
I wish I had pulled them. I'm sorry, I did not.
Yeah, no. That's just fine. But they are. But yeah, there's a saint, and then there's a geometric design, and then a saint. And on the top is a sun, right? And then it has my motto with the winged lion of Saint Mark on the top of it, etched in brass. And then the sun is made out of brass as well. And what I just had refurbished actually was that piece, because the tips of the sun were coming free, and so Vrin remade that entire piece and reattached it. It's much more solid now.
Is your Camille, is that some of Bane's work?
It is. The Camille's Bane's work, and it's Bane's work and a shop in India, I think, but most of it, a significant amount of it's Bane's work. And it also has a liner that Bane sewed and put together. Thank you, Bane. I didn't mention you in the process of the helmet. And what you can't see that was kind of cool was it's got a ring of gold links around the bottom, as well as, kind of as a chain, a nod to the chain.
They are, the three of them are an incredible team.
Oh yeah.
And then this is your Vigil Tent, which is also one of Bane's creations.
It is. And he's an architect, and the fact that this thing is modular, is amazing to me. He can take this little piece and make a vigil space, right? And then he's got just an enormous space that can hold like an entire court with all of the attached pieces that he pulls out, at Sport of Kings.
He calls them his medieval Legos.
Yes.
Really cool. My computer's being a butt, sorry.
Oh, there's Octomasares.
He looks like he's...
And Olin.
He looks like he's like judging you.
Yeah, well, maybe my face wasn't adequately. I don't know.
Oh, that's funny. Oh, okay. So then these two that snuck in here.
Yep.
There we go.
That's Steercar. Steercar heralded me into court that day. Love Steercar. Watched his interview on your program. Love that. And thank you, Steercar, for also being a doctor and doing all those wonderful things that you're doing over in Washington during this absolutely horrifying time. And that's my hair being cut by Annalika, and my lady standing there holding the implements and yeah, I just washed my hair and washed my body off. And
it looks like you got a good 8 inches cut off your hair.
Yeah, or more. Yeah, it was quite a bit. It was unfortunately a little too split to donate, but yeah. I was happy to do it. It was powerful symbol.
Quite a bit.
Sorry,
it was
I don't know
unfortunately a
what's
little too
happening.
Split to donate, but
There we go. I don't
Okay.
know.
The echo.
Yeah, I know.
I was worried that was on my end or something.
No, it was me.
Oh.
I yeah. I'm having some issues apparently. I apologize.
You did all of the sort of ritual things out of the history books. Was it meaningful to you, or did it feel contrived? I mean, how?
No, I wanted it. I very much, in fact, it's funny you mentioned that, because I was sitting there and I was getting ready to do all of this, and Ulfred said to me, focus, basically that this is important to you. And if we're just going to do it as a ritual, it doesn't have any value, right? If it's just noise, or pretend, then it did have meaning. The whole idea of being, well, for a couple things. One, being connected to the historical, lineage in the SCA, right? But then also being connected to this larger idea of people who had this role historically of knights, right? And then frankly the connection to the ideographic idea we have of knights, right? And of chivalry and all of these things. And that was very important to me. I stayed up. I will tell you, I stayed up till dawn. My knight at the time did not. I would like the record to show I made it, no one else. But yeah.
It's a beautiful photo.
Yeah.
That's a good one. Oh yeah, facere quam conare. So that was made by Magnus. That is some of his work, and he does amazing leather work. I was happy to have a piece, by him. That's Michael. And facere quam conare is very short is do rather than try, right? And that was sort of that's basically kind of my motto. It's the idea, yes, it's Yoda. If you stretch it out, right, it's do or do not. There is no try, right? But the thing is that it also was meaningful. Do it. Don't say you're just going to try. Do the thing, and you'll fail or you won't, but you'll have done it. Yeah. Oh yes, there's Antonio. Yeah. So by the way, I've only ever fought him like one time, maybe twice, maybe. I don't think so though. And he's really, really good. So Frank, if you're listening, you really ought to show up more and fight people. And
Because we love you.
Maybe.
Tell me about your knighting outfit, did you have a kind of an army of seamstresses working?
I did. Well, I mean, an army. So this is actually kind of fun. So the shoes were from Viking Leathercraft. I'll just throw that out there. But the hose and the chausses and brays were made by Finn. The tunic was, oh my God. Do you ever have one of those moments where you know who the person is and you can see their face?
Night.
I'm really embarrassed. Anyway, she made it, and and then Driffa wove the trim, and the woman who made the tunic, who I am so sorry if you're watching, I'm going to have to beg forgiveness. Attached all of the ornamentation on it. You can't really see it particularly well, but there's pearls as well as stones set in metal that's all around the collar. And then the cloak was made by Dame Megan. Yeah, and that's a thing. It's not even finished. But it's a piece of work. There are a ton of pearls and beads and work on that. I was trying to go for something that was different but similar in some respects in style to what was worn by Roger II in the coronation cloak. And then the colors, obviously, again, I talked about that before, but you can see it more plainly. Oh, the under tunics were made by two of Goulinet's apprentices. One was Mistress Althea now. Mistress, not Althea, oh God dang it. Thank you. Yes. I'm like, Facebook, it's evil in some ways for the SCA.
Sure.
Yeah, and the other was Ted, who I've forgotten his SCA name. Anyway.
It's really beautiful.
Yeah, thank you.
So I have to apologize because I said an army of seamstresses, and I should have said tailors because
yes, fair enough.
It needed to have a gender neutral term, and I apologize.
Oh, that's fair, and it is that both Finn and Ted did work on it. Finn actually did something kind of entertaining. He even put a little bit of hand embroidery on the waistband, which was another nod to the little rainbow star thing.
Oh.
Yeah. Katrine, thank you. My lady just popped off on the popped up on off screen and said it was Katrine that made the tunic. I feel so much better. Okay.
She's a goddess.
Thank you, Katrine. Thank you.
I have an art crush on Katrine.
In a big way.
Oh, I can see that.
Here's a close-up of the that corner of your scroll.
Yeah. And that yeah. And that's very similar. That piece is very similar to a scene from the Malinowski Bible, I think it is, or the Morgan Psalter. Now I'm confused. It's one or the other. Anyway, it's very specific as to the period, early 13th century, late 12th. So this was when I was captain of the guard for Eric and Drafina during their, was this their first reign or their second? I think it was their first reign.
Hard to tell.
I'm sorry?
It's hard to tell. I don't know.
Yeah, if it was their first reign, I was actually head of retinue. I just realized that. So I'll bet you it is. I'll bet you it's the first reign.
Is that the first time that you served as head of retinue?
It is. It is the first time. I'd been captain of the guard twice before that, but it was the first time I'd served as head of retinue. And I actually, that was a good experience. It was neat because Eric, such a good guy, and he and I, became really good friends over the course of the reign. But I got to travel with them a lot, and he grew up in the SCA, right? Literally, like I joined when I was 12. He was born, obviously, into the SCA.
He has royal ladies come up to him and tell him that they changed his diapers.
Yeah.
Super awesome. I know he loved that.
And so it was neat. It was fun to get to know him and to get to know her, and to travel around and really be involved to the extent that I was. They put a lot of trust in me, and I really appreciated it.
It's a job all three of us have done, and it's an honor to have that trust and to have that because you're all up in each other's business when you're in that job. I mean, it's a really close relationship.
Oh yeah.
For the duration of that reign.
Yep. Yeah, there's no question of that. Okay. So you may see me looking somewhat sheepish in this picture. That's because this is the presentation of my court baronage. I can never quite come up with the right word for that. And the thing is, they didn't give me a coronet. They gave me my own helmet because it has this band on it, right? And Ugo and I went rounds about this thing where I said, I don't know if we should put that on there or not, because it's not, it's kind of presumptuous. And he was like, nah, it's fine. It's great. It's art. And it doesn't violate any of the rules. It's all the curves are the other way and everything else. Like, okay. But sure enough, it came back and got me a little bit,
But technically, there aren't sumptuary laws in Ontario.
Yeah, that's true. And yeah.
And now it doesn't matter.
Yes, and now it doesn't matter. Oh, that's Phelan and I fighting when Phelan was still a squire. This was over at, I think it was Border
like a Baroness War.
I think it was Border Wars, actually.
War.
And I was head of retinue for Eric at this time. That the thing that was kind of neat about this was, and I'm going to brag a little bit, but mostly on everybody else because, but we went over there. It was me and Rainer and Eric and Phelan and who else?
Phelan says it's honor war.
Oh, it's honor war. Okay, thank you, Phelan. And Demantel. I can't.
Philip
Philip.
or Seamus?
Yes, it was Philip. And who else was there? Dave Hollingsworth, who I've suddenly forgotten his SCA brand, and maybe Sun Jiang. I can't remember if Sun Jiang was there, but we formed a team because they had this big competition, right? And and we won. We were the King's Ramrod was the name of our team, and we smoked everybody. We'd never done this before, so that's why I'm bragging a little bit, because we went up against teams that had actually worked together before, and we won. So, but it was a lot of fun. That belt actually has an interesting story. So it just so happens that was given to me by Sir Raphael, right? Now you'll note it's really long, it's cloth, it's actually a gi belt with a ring sewn onto it, right? So it's a white gi belt. The thing is, he was given that before he was knighted, right?
Wow.
And the first time I met Raphael was like in 1983 or so, maybe 84, at Grand Outlandish, right? And I heralded him on the field. Now the thing that was kind of fun about it was he came down there and basically said, I challenge all of the knights of this area to meet my skill. He was a squire at the time, right? And, and bragged. So I got to announce him bragging, and then he got thoroughly hammered for most of the weekend by everybody down there. But he, we remembered each other, and he had gotten this belt that long ago. And so he gave it to me because of the connection, it had to historically to the.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Eric said this is the event where your crazy driving got you pulled over 3 times.
Oh, wow. That is so not true. we had these lights on the Kingdom trailer, the Royal trailer that kept going out, and it was like, it wasn't like the turn signals and the brakes, right? It was like the running lights were going out, and so I didn't know it, of course, until it was dark. Well, every state patrolman between Portland and Honor War had to tell us that they were out, including at the gate to the event. Right? So we're sitting there, we get pulled over at the gate to the event, and I'm like, great. I'm like, we're going right here. We're not going any further, I promise.
That's not a good look.
No, it was not good. We got the Royal trailer rewired after that.
Hilarious.
That's just me being skeptical. And I'm watching mostly because I don't really fight as well as either of them. Certainly not as well as Sven, and Cathal has my number half the time as well. So yeah. Same event. Oh, okay. So there's something that was a culture shock. First time I saw that. Right.
The expression on Eric's face is priceless.
Yeah.
That's because Eric is probably poking him with his sword. Is Eric going to own up to it is the question.
My favorite face in this is Colin.
Yeah.
Colin's just, yeah.
It's so cute.
Yeah.
What was this a culture shock to you because in the Outlands you take off your weapons, or?
Yeah, well, so growing up in the SCA, right? Yeah. By the trying to remember if by the mid late 90s. Now I left, like I said, in 99. I'm trying to remember. I think it had stopped being as much of a thing, right? But I believe it still was conceptually. The idea was if you weren't a knight, right, you didn't bear your arm, or a master of arms. You didn't wear, or mistress, a member of the 2 branches of the Order of Chivalry. That you didn't bury arms into the presence of the crown, right? And certainly that was how I grew up. So, seeing this, it was like, oh, that's just all sorts of special. What are they doing to that poor man or person, Why are they doing that? Oh, not sure what I think about that,
I don't know why, like Dax down here underneath everything. That's like a danger zone. That seems like it's not a good idea to be down in there.
I
don't know. Anyway, this is an incredible photograph.
That is when the chain was placed around my neck. And that was a really touching moment. Ulf knighting me. Yeah, that was really special. It's one of the moments, different people have different attachments to different elements of the whole experience of the knighting. I think for me, I really felt it at that moment when the chain went on, because it was the weight of the responsibility, the weight of the oaths I was, taken, and what those really meant to me, and how long I'd been in the SCA, and the moment that this was occurring. Thinking back on all the things that I'd done, and all the things that the future had yet to, the promises I had to fulfill, so to speak.
And the photographer of here is Diarna.
Yes, yeah. That was a really amazing photo. It's on my Facebook. It was one of the photos I periodically put up because I don't generally like photos of myself. That's why there's not, a huge variety of them. And this is this is one of my favorites.
Yeah, we can't relate to that at all.
Every time I have to pull a photo for like an interview, I have to take a selfie because there aren't any of me at SCA events.
What was this? This must have been
Ontario West?
I think it must be. Yeah, I think it must be. There's Hansa and Alail, Angelica, and Atia and Ula. Oh, I know what this is. This is us. This is us at Ontario West War during court, and it's the To the Beaches cancer
Fundraiser.
Yeah.
Duchess Dagmar would like to know what your favorite romance novel is.
Just for her, I'll say Wolf of the North. Or The Viking, or whatever that bloody. She made me read this thing. It's her fault. No, there was this when she was on the throne. Oh, great. We actually have the novel. That's the actual novel. I will introduce you to the amazing work of it's Viking Warrior by Connie Mason. Just to give you an idea of the quality of this novel.
We're gonna have a reading.
Oh yeah.
Oh please.
This is how it starts because it doesn't get better than this. Wulfric the Ruthless, son of the late Jarl of Horgaland, Rollo Redbeard, rose gloriously naked from the fjord near his farmstead, right? And it goes on. Well, I'll read a little bit more because the next part is quite funny. Tall, golden, and magnificently male, Wolf strode toward shore, water dripping down his powerful body in rivulets.
So, the next time you get heralded into Crown,
Yeah.
I think somebody needs to take that little section there and just rework it a little bit.
Oh boy. Yeah, no, I immediately started making comments about how proud he was manly, how proud his maleness was coming out of the 42-degree water of fjord near his farmstead.
Magnificently male.
Yes, magnificently male, yes.
Oh, okay.
Oh my, I could have a lot of fun with that.
Mm.
The heralds are saying they're in.
Thanks, heralds.
Honestly, I think Dagmar should have to herald you in with that.
She would do it. She would do it.
Yep.
I bet.
And actually, I think she needs to sing a song.
So
that's
earlier someone asked about your smoking cod piece.
Was that Johan?
Yes, it was Johan.
So Duke Johan and I go way back. Anyway, in 1980, I'll bet you he knows the year better than I do, 86-ish, I went to a 12th night in Kerta, Barony of Kerta. And at this 12th night, it was a Tudor, I believe, event. And there was an outrageous codpiece contest. Well, at the time, my persona was not Justin de Leon. It was Diego Benedicto Gustavo Constanzo Juarez. And I did a kind of a Renaissance costume, and I had a codpiece. Well, it was, at the time I was considering for my arms a dragon's mask, which is the face of a dragon, right? And so together with one of the people that I lived with at the time, I put together this codpiece that looked like a dragon's face. And on the inside it, we put a tube that had muffler's tape, and then we cut holes in the end, and you could put, the reason for the muffler's tape was because you could put cones of incense in it, and smoke came out the nostrils, right? And if you pressed on the top just a little bit, you could get it to puff. Now, no, it gets funnier because not only does it smoke, but, well, so the nose was made out of aluminum foil, right? It wasn't really stout material. So a lot of people don't know this part of the story, but what ended up happening was at one point in the night, I went, oh, there's no more smoke coming out. That's no fun, right? So lighting cones of incense is kind of an art sometimes, right? So I lit a cone of incense and I blew it out and I thought it was going and I put it in there and no smoke came out. And I was like, oh, darn it, it must have gone out. And there was really no way to get it off functionally to put more cones of incense in, right? So I just lit another one and put it in there. And then I lit another one and put it in there when none of it came out. I didn't think to check, my 17-year-old brain did not think to check whether or not, or 16, did not think to check whether the nostrils were blocked, right? Well, surprisingly, while muffler tape works really well to insulate, right? The 3 cones of incense all burning simultaneously, right, was generating a tremendous amount of heat all of a sudden. And there's a failure point in materials, as it turns out, where they're absorbing heat, and then they're not absorbing it anymore. And all of a sudden, my groin, let's say, got really, really hot, right? And literally, I went running to the bathroom. I had to have the thing cut off of me because it had this elaborate braid that tied it in the back that held it in place, right? That had bells on it and everything else, in the period. And yeah, but that's the story of the smoking codpiece. I did win the most outrageous codpiece contest that year because nobody else had anything that actually, smoked. So that was
Johan says it was 1986. So
86. There you go. Yeah. Yep. I thought he would remember better.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was on the throne at the time, I believe.
Awesome. That's awesome. So I think this is probably
Sport of Kings.
Sport of Kings and the grand tournament.
Yeah, Bane is, well, so actually this is the one of the presentations for the historical for the grand champion.
Yeah.
Right. And Bane is presenting and he told a story of the Normans and the founding of the Normans from the perspective of Rollo. And in the story, Rollo has a dream or a vision or something of these red-winged birds surrounding. I can't remember the whole thing. Anyway, there were red-winged birds involved in Rollo, the Norman, and so we're holding the shields as symbolic of, like a wing.
Very cool.
Bane is really good. Unfortunately, I think Bane was going against Steercar's armor that year.
Not Steercar's armor.
Yeah, and that was the Steercar. What's he call it? The Ugroli suit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And this looks like more Honor War.
That is more Honor War, as far as I know.
And in addition to being their head of retinue, you did a lot of heralding.
I've done some. So the reason behind that is, you travel light sometimes, you don't have people everywhere you go, or you, as you know, you don't have staff to handle all of it. I believe this is the second reign, because I believe this must be when, oh no, this must be the end of the first, because Havork and Mary Grace are stepping up, I think that's Havork.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Oh, now I can't remember. I think it was first reign. Oh, that's me funning around in my backyard. I have a really cool Camel and I want to see what it looked like.
It gives me Excalibur flashbacks. I love it.
It looks
Yeah, it's definitely very 19. I was also messing around with my beard. I'd let it grow way out, and so I just decided to see what it looked like with various lengths of hair. That was just me having fun, though. It was. Oh, and that's actually a neat banner. My squire, Yoan at Maddock, actually gave that to me as a gift. He had one made for me and one made for my lady, that have our arms on them.
Very cool.
Yeah. Morgan and Livia. And I was captain of the guard for them. This was, however, I think actually I must have been captain of the guard at the time. Yeah. I was trying to decide if this was.
Looks like maybe they're processing in.
That's what I was wondering. I think it may be, yeah, because they're wearing their ducal coronets. Yeah, this is when they were processing in for the finals. Actually, I think.
Maybe. I see where your support lies.
Hey, I felt really bad. I was like sitting there looking at all of you, and then the next time I end up on the other side again. I'm like, I really like Sven. I really like you. It's like
I'm joking, totally joking.
Okay.
Are you guys doing the Macarena? What's going on here?
This is a yeah. It looks like it.
Yeah, it does.
I can dance when I'm forced to. I don't remember what event this was at.
Not really. I think it's probably an equestrian event.
Oh yeah, yes, it was. It was. Gosh.
Ampri?
Yeah, maybe. Or it probably was Ampri because I don't think I've been to another equestrian event. Yeah.
Because Anissa's got her horse gear on.
Yeah. No, that's exactly what it is. More heralding by me. Oh, that is. Why can I never remember Betsy's?
Is it Kulan?
Yes, it is. I like I said, Facebook has ruined me for some people.
And I recognize her because I recognize the belt, which is funny.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I don't remember who did this one. It might have been Ivan. But anyway, there was apparently some. This photo is the photo of me has been purposed for different things. There's one where where someone's saying something about me judging. This is another judging one. There's also one where someone's implying I'm stoned. So, but mostly I think the sun was kind of in my eyes. And it's just but it is a really entertaining photo. And Eric is even more amazing in that.
Yep.
Yeah.
His beard is off the hook there. Like that's pretty awesome.
That stare. So good.
Yes, by the way, Eric, if you're listening,
You look constipated.
Sit up, Eric. Sit up. Jesus. Excuse me.
Oh my God. Okay. And look, you're playing the drums.
Mm-hmm. This was at 50th year. In Indiana. And I'm pretty sure, I'm almost 100% positive. And yeah, so I mentioned I do play very basic Middle Eastern drum. I can play 3 rhythms pretty solidly, which are Baladi, Masmudi, and Ayub, which are 3 very basic rhythms. Yeah, had to learn to do those, like I said. But
I don't even know what those are.
They're rhythms. I mean,
but cool.
This is an abacal. And I'm trying to remember what I was heralding. Wow. I was heralding something, obviously.
Is that Kellen? That's Kellen in the.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm almost certain this is abacal.
Is that their first crown?
It is. Well, no, it's not their first one. It's the one where Arnsbjorn and Inga were crowned.
So it's yeah.
Yeah, and so Eric's second reign. I'm just trying to remember what I was. I'll bet you I was heralding Eric into court. There we go. I was about to say.
At Inga and Arnsbjorn's coronation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
We had a really interesting time in Abacal.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh wait. Oh, I was there for that.
Yes, you were. Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah. Oh, that was one heck of a storm. So that was a thing. So while your tent was being flooded out and killed by the storm, I was standing under the well, it was still a principality at the time. So the prince and princess's pavilion, while Duke Vic and someone else were holding the pavilion down in the wind, and I was wearing my armor and standing, leaning over the princess and one of her children because the hail was so heavy it was hurting people. But I was in my armor, so I didn't feel a dang thing, right? And yeah, no, I got to. That was a heck of a storm, though.
That was the worst weather I've ever been in at an event.
Yeah, that was intense.
It was epic. But it was a bonding experience.
Yeah, fair enough.
This looks like Stromgard.
And I think this is July Coronation when Kjartan stepped up.
Yeah, I think so too.
It's the one Sean came down for.
Yep. And that would be the second or the first? Oh, I don't know.
2016 has to be the second.
Yeah. Yeah, that's Vinlig. That's a group of people we get together, family. Love all the people in this photo. Get together in the summer, and we work on things like the pit house in the background there. And everyone dresses in Norse for the weekend, you know, at least a couple times. You know, sometimes we're just working in clothes, you know, but we finally finished the pit house. They had to replace the roof this year, but you've got, you know, Torfin and Gera and Otar and Anne's daughter, who I don't know if she has an SCA name, and Cathal. There's Craig and Inga and Anne, and yeah. Anyway,
Sir Merowyn.
Yep.
And
Sir Merowyn.
Yep.
Yep.
Lots of people
Right.
I love in that photo.
Yep.
It's a good photo.
Miss all of those faces so much.
That is me working on a runestone. I think that's the one that I made for my lady. It has a poem, kind of a simple, very short kenning on the back that I'd written, and on the front it has basically a cupbearer, a horn bearer, one of the handmaidens of,
The Valkyries.
yeah.
Very cool.
Your car makes such good faces.
Where was this photo 2 weeks ago? Oh,
Yeah. Barrick and Dagmar and Bane and Steercarp. And
Really, we're all having
obviously paying attention to what's actually going on as opposed to Steercarp. I don't know what he's doing.
He's flirting with the camera.
That is Ontir West War, which has become one of my favorite events, and I miss it so much. The site is just amazing there,
it really is.
and the people. Oh yeah. And that is a presentation of a belt to Sir Merowyn
From Sir Ren.
from Sir Ren, and yeah.
Yeah, I think that belt has all of the devices of all of the women who have been
Does it?
knighted in Ontir on it.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah. That
Very
made me really happy when she was knighted.
And there's
And that's the family. That's all of the lineage. Yeah. So let's see. You've got,
Can you name them all?
oh, yes, I can.
use actual SCA names.
Yeah, that's the problem I'm going to have.
We all need to test ourselves going back into playing again.
Yeah, well, because you got Laurencio and Einar and Merowyn and Octamasades and Bane and Olin and me.
Ishvan,
Ishvan, Dan, I was about to say Dan, Ishvan,
Freddie,
Freddie, Fiok, Ulfred, and Lori, who I cannot remember her name.
Freda,
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Ulfred.
and
Thank you.
Merowyn.
I didn't say Merowyn?
Nope, you skipped over her. It's okay.
Sorry, Merowyn. Wow. Yes. And Merowyn. That is Sport of Kings 2019. Did we hold it in 2019?
Yeah, 2019 was
Yeah.
the last one.
And
Did you steal Cathal's body armor?
no, that is body armor that used to belong to Kjartan.
Mm.
And I decided my back was having so many problems, I decided to lighten my armor substantially, and that's a heck of a lot lighter than my Lamellar was. So
Very cool. And this is a good close-up of the helmet.
it is.
You can kind of see some of the.
And unfortunately, you can also see that the mail had to be replaced. So, which
I always thought that this was one of Vren's early laser cut ones. I'm really impressed that it's Ugo chiseling it out.
yeah,
Okay. And
I'm wearing that right now. That is perfectly period feast. As I said, right before everything got locked down, I think it was January, and she came up behind me. She was dressed as a character from illustrations of the time period.
Raphael.
Yeah, and I loved it.
She looks like Pikachu.
Yeah, she does.
Yeah.
And are these Ugo pants, or did you make
They
them?
are. That was some of the work was done by me, but it was primarily Ugo. Almost all of it, frankly.
And then this is your lady Erin did the shirt.
Yeah.
I remember her.
Marion did the shirt. It's got lots of smocking,
Very cool.
and yeah, it's actually, it was her first attempt at smocking, so I've always been super impressed by it.
She did.
There's something really sexy about a black shirt with Germans. I don't know what it is, but I'm not trying to make you uncomfortable.
Oh no, that's okay. I appreciate that. No, I like the fact that it's black. It looks really neat. This I'm pretty sure is
It's his knighting.
Sun Jong's knighting. Yeah.
So this is 12th night this year, not this year.
Yeah.
2020.
And I went and I spoke during his knighting. And
And this is his lady Susanna, who is a goddess.
she's a really neat lady. Originally, she really became active here after being active in the Middle Kingdom.
Yeah.
And, her 14th century game cannot be touched.
No, and she has she did all of these Chinese outfits, and she has an eye for period aesthetic that translates through different cultures and time periods.
Yeah, I saw the Scythian hat she made that was just amazing. Yeah.
And she and Rifkin are teaching a shield painting class on Sunday.
Oh, are they? I didn't know that.
So that'll be so. So these are some pictures of you and Erin. Sorry.
Yeah, that is. I don't remember which. I do not remember which crown that is. I think that's the one where I finished like 6th. I think at the end of Eric's first reign, which I really wish I'd won because I was going to make him be my head of retinue.
He'd probably do an amazing job.
He probably would, which would just irk me to no end.
And there's more of an extended.
Oh yes, and there's the even more extended family. Ah,
Yeah, I can't get through the names on that one.
I'm going to go back so that we can see.
let's see. Who do we have? Okay. Why can I not remember Matt's SCA name? Matthew McCullough on the left.
I was going to say it's Mr. Bernadette.
Yes, Mr. Bernadette. And Laurencio and Istvan and Cathal and
Einar and Merowyn.
Einar. Good God, that's it. You can't see enough of his face to really make it up. And Merowyn, Nox Masades, and me, and
Is that
Tyus. I was like Noah, not Noah, Tyus. And Daphne, and that is Sebastian, and Freddie, and Scamp, aka Felix. Probably I should call him Felix, but and then Olin and Sterling and Fiak and Elfrida and Ulfrid. So.
Yay, you win! And that was your final test.
Oh.
You're done. Woohoo! So thank you for tripping down memory lane with us there.
I appreciate it.
That was really cool. So since those last few events in January, when everything shut down, what has been your focus in regards to the SCA?
So it kind of was my focus going into the pandemic as well, but I've been working really hard on navigating what's really, I think, a difficult space for a lot of people in the SCA, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion in the SCA. And I think the thing that's very difficult is the same thing that confronts a lot of people in our society, which is to say that we don't ever want to see ourselves as the villain in the story, right? We have a limited capacity to be able to engage in a thought process like that, and to genuinely reflect on the history and the patterns and cultures and structures that exist around us. And so what ends up happening is, to an extent, we end up making these decisions over time that advantage certain groups and disadvantage others. And a lot of it's, very simply human behaviors. It's not something that's usually inherently evil. It's not usually something that's done with intentionality. It's done as a function of how our brains process information, how we react to pain and trauma, how we react to very simple ideas like how someone looks, how someone behaves, right? And then it's compounded by the fact that our society and our culture, right, that we exist in outside the SCA necessarily is determinate largely in how we interact in it, right? And so the fact that women in the SCA, for example, have experienced a very difficult time with regards to integration and success in combat, right? It shouldn't surprise anyone, because these spaces are difficult for women outside the SCA to navigate in many cases, right? I mean, when we examine the fact that if you look at women's sports, right, they're invariably, there'll be pay disparities. The women's national soccer team and women's soccer is far more popular in the United States than men's soccer, but the amount of money, the amount of respect that they're given by the institutions themselves is frequently less, right? And only through direct and intentional action can these sorts of things be overcome. And so one of the things that I've been focusing on is trying to look at some of these things as part of a council of people, or as a servant to those ideas, right? And trying to speak to them, trying to to speak for people to some extent. I hate to use that term because really I'm when it comes down to it, I'm 6'3". I'm pretty able-bodied. I'm very white. If I cut my hair and frankly, if I cut my hair and put a cross on, I could pass as generic white guy in the United States, right? But there's a lot of privilege that accrues to those things. And so when I say speaking for, in this case, what I really mean is speaking to the issues that these people who have spoken before need to try to help people to listen to them, right? And it's across any number of topics that I'd like to see the SCA advance on. I can speak more directly as a participant of the fighting community to other knights and to people who want to be knights and maybe seek to change those communities. But as a peer of the society, I have an obligation, I feel, to try to change the whole society for the better, right? And that's not to say, again, that there's evil, that's being done, right? Yes, there are people who are bad, right? And yes, there are racists and people who are misogynistic and who engage in these behaviors. But trying to help people learn, help people grow, help the organization grow, help it to adopt policies which are specifically counter to these forces, these veiling forces that exist in our broader society. And I try to speak to that. I try to work towards that. I have to finish submitting, for example, a review of the Marshall's handbooks with regards to gendered language. I noticed that, and a couple of other small things, but there's no necessity, for example, to be using his, her, right? First of all, obviously it excludes or makes uncomfortable people who are non-gender conforming. It also necessarily creates this binary dichotomy of gender and sex that doesn't accurately reflect reality. And so we can get rid of that just by replacing it with the word there, right? Which is both a singular and a plural noun, and things like that, right? But when you make policies like that, when you seek to address things directly and intentionally, right, you put up the framework that begins to change the way people interact, right? There's an author and a professor named Ibram X. Kendi, who relatively recently wrote a book about anti-racism. And one of the things that he talks about in it is this idea of structure, and how structure and laws propagate racism after a time, right? So not only can you not get rid of racism if you don't alter the structure, but the structure and the laws themselves, all of these things actually function to make more racists, right? To make things worse. And so by adopting and seeking to act on policies that are explicitly anti-racist or anti-misogynist or anti-bigotry, right, we begin to alter the discussion, alter the culture itself, right, in a positive way.
It's changing the system and shifting a systemic racist society towards one that's not. And if you change the foundation and the roots of the thing, the hope is the rest will follow.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's not without its growing pains.
No, and it's difficult. Social engineering isn't easy, so to speak, right? And making positive changes, making changes of this sort is not simple. When you start pulling on these threads, you start changing people's perceptions of themselves, right? If you say that society in the United States, for example, is structurally, systemically racist, culturally racist, what does that mean to all the people who believe in America, right? Who believe in this concept that we have of ourselves, this story we have told ourselves, and they're hurt by it, right? And we can't act without empathy. We shouldn't, let me rephrase that. We shouldn't act without empathy to those ideas, but we also can't have them stop us, right? Because to let it be stopped is to let it continue to propagate itself generation after generation. There was a professor at Princeton named Eddie Goad, who was speaking in the moments, I think it was right after the announcement of the trial of Derek Chauvin, right, in Minneapolis. And it wasn't after the verdict, it was when, I believe it was when the trial was first announced. And he was talking as a Black man, but he was also talking as an American. And he said, we have these ideas of ourselves, right, that aren't the truth. And that when we are dishonest with ourselves, when we don't acknowledge who we really are, right, then we will pass that on to our children and our grandchildren, and this conflict will just keep coming back, right? And when we say, well, we're not what happened there, when we say we're not racist, when we say we're not these things, right, but don't back it up in a way that's explicitly against these things, we then are encouraging it to continue. And that's difficult for people to confront. It's difficult. I don't like thinking about it, right? I don't like sitting there and spending a lot of time in self-reflection, thinking about, what wrong things, so to speak, have I done, have I allowed myself to do, has been allowed to be taught to me such that I act these things out, right? I'm not, I can tell stories of moments where when I was, a kid, I had done things that, looking back, were unquestionably, racist or unquestionably, sexist or misogynistic. And it's in the acknowledgement of those things and the recognition that what led me to those moments, right? Why was it acceptable for me to behave in that way, that, I can grow. But if we don't engage in any kind of self-reflection, if we don't look at it honestly, if we don't accept that those things really were what they were, then we won't. And so that's what I try to advocate for, is just that idea for the SCA, right? That we can really be what we want to be, that we can tell a story about who we are that's true if we change some things, right? And move forward from that point. But we can't continue to not acknowledge it. We can't say that when someone tells us they were called a slur for being gay, or they were identified by their race, right, for being Black or Latino, and these things happen. They're not moments that are
unique,
that are made up, and they're not unique, right? There are people who approached me when a lot of these things started coming to the surface, who I'm not gonna reveal them because that's their business, and they told me in confidence, but they told me about their experiences and in great detail, and the extent to which they were subject to what we would think of as very typically racist behavior, right, by people that were their superiors, in the SCA, and they were just expected to absorb it because the culture expects it to be absorbed, right? And so we can change that. And listening to Rifkin and to Merowyn and seeing the things that have been said or have been the conduct that I've been witness to in precincts when they're not there, right, where things are said, and we can't pretend that those things aren't happening, right? If I see someone on the field, for example, and Rivkin, I'm sorry, I'm going to talk about something real quick about you. If I see you emotionally elevated and walking off the field, right? And then someone walks over and says to me something that is sexist with regards to that behavior, right? Or says, there Rifkin's doing that thing again, right? I immediately think about the fact that, well, I just saw 10 other guys walk off the field really elevated and a little upset, and no one said a damn thing about that, right? So why is this different? And those sorts of things are the things that we need to look at and consider. And
it's different because I'm not part of the club.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
the
fact that she wears a white belt and has for longer than a lot of those guys, doesn't mean a fucking thing.
Right. And that's the thing, right? That's the thing that we need to be better about, right? Those moments, as Rifkin can attest, are real. They're not things that are coming out of being made up. They're lived experiences of people, and they have value, they have lessons for us, and those lessons are important, and we need to act on.
Rifkin, do you want to respond to that?
No, I just no, I really appreciate you, Justin, and I appreciate the way that you have, and I think the hard thing really is that everybody perceives the world from their own position.
Mm-hmm.
And because we perceive the world from our own position, we don't realize that not saying something or doing something the way that it's always been done affects people in a way that it doesn't affect us.
Right.
And once you open your eyes to that, it doesn't make you a bad person that you participated in that, because you didn't know.
Right.
But now that you know, you can do better, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't make the past better either for the person that has been feeling persecuted.
Right.
But I don't think it's as hard as people think. I think you just have to step outside yourself and say, look, I don't understand because I don't live that.
Right.
And yeah.
And I'm just going to piggyback on that and listen to people's stories and believe them, mm-hmm. instead of writing them off or gaslighting them and cheapening their experience.
There's a period in the SCA from about 2012 to mm-hmm. 2016 that I would just love to just throw away, because it was very, very difficult for me in a way that I don't think it should have been. Mm-hmm. And I'm gonna let that go, but yeah.
Good times. So so I think that this is really important work, and I think that it's important to have male voices talking to other men about kind of backing up believing in women's experiences like that, the same way, and doing the work so that the 4 female knights that we have in our kingdom aren't doing that work, because that's an unfair expectation.
It's something that part of it, is something that's a little easier for me to speak to, in that, even though I am male and all of these things, right? I can hit those issues a little more directly and easily, talk about them more directly. I have larger problems when I'm dealing with trying to speak and amplify the voices of people from marginalized communities, such as people of different races, only because part of the problem for me is the reality that I can't even vaguely identify with those experiences, right? I've been othered when I was a small child. I got, the religion that I belonged to was very marginalized. I ended up being beaten up in school a few times, but I didn't have to, like I said, I could take the clothes off I was wearing and, nobody would, be the wiser, right? And in one of the things, I'm reading a book right now by an author, Isabel Wilkerson, talking about, it's called Case, The Origins of Our Discontent. And but one of the things that I think is something to consider is the extent to which we involuntarily engage in a lot of these behaviors, right? Which is to say that we practice them because we've been taught to practice them, right? And when we examine all of these issues, when we look at all of them, one of the things that stands out to me is the extent to which we hold people responsible for moments when they try to move outside the frame we place them in, right? And so when you have female fighters or people of different races or people from the LGBTQI plus community, right, who are trying to live their experiences and trying to embrace the SCA and enjoy the SCA, one of the things that happens is they run into the problem of moving outside the box that society has made, right? And every time that happens, to some extent, as she would say, the superior caste or caste, right, pushes back, right? Necessarily it must, because for the people who are members of that caste, right, they've been taught they're supposed to, right? We don't exist in a vacuum. We don't exist in a situation where we can just pretend that the rest of the SCA, or the rest of the world isn't there. So, yeah. Anyway, sorry I brought this way down and
No, that's fine.
made it super serious, but yeah.
They're important conversations, and it's an important topic to make more normal, I guess, because it really isn't that hard to step outside of yourself and be empathetic to somebody else's journey that isn't your own. And once you see that your perspective is not the only perspective, and that sometimes there isn't a truth, that
Right.
there's a lot of truths,
Yeah.
and none of them are actually wrong.
Right.
The world becomes more complicated, but it also becomes a lot more forgiving.
Yeah, and I think that you really nail the key to it, and it's that concept of empathy, right? Which, it's just to try and pull a little bit back into the SCA directly and to history. One of the things that various writers talking about chivalry, specifically, I'm thinking of Desharnais and Lull, they will talk about the idea of charity and how charity functioned and how faith functioned in society, right? And the things they expected of people of a certain class during that period. And with regards to that idea of empathy, that concept of charity is very close in that we need to be willing to give of ourselves to that time to listen, that energy and the emotional energy to allow these conversations to happen, right? To engage with these topics. And we also need to be courageous, right? And you know, what I've been talking about this a couple times recently, but with people on Facebook, but it was interesting to me that the virtue of courage isn't identified by either Descharny or Lull as separate, right? What they basically say is that courage is in the act itself, right? So it's being charitable when it's difficult, right? Is courage. Being empathetic and listening to people when it's hard, when it hurts you, when you have to admit that you've done something wrong or been part of a system or a way of living that is necessarily causing the oppression or causing harm to another group of people, right? And those conversations, those things, engaging in those takes real courage, right? If you're going to actually listen and you're going to do these things. But I think it's worthy of us to do it as peers, as, you know, as knights, as laurels, as pelicans, as, you know, who embrace the ideas of chivalry that we want to embrace.
I agree. Yeah. So, can you explain what the DEI Council is and what its function is and isn't? Because not every kingdom has a DEI Council yet.
We're, I believe, the only kingdom that does, actually.
Right.
We came into existence just before the office was created itself. Pardon me, before the society office was created and the subsequent officers in those kingdoms that have them are usually part of the seneschalate. But I believe different kingdoms there's not a uniform policy yet. But what we function as, there's a head of the committee who presently is Becca Ross Anor, and we basically have a mandate to attempt to educate, to attempt to advocate for policy changes that will improve the climate and culture. To advise the Crown on issues where the Crown or the seneschalate or any, you know, individual may need advice or resources to advance the conversation, the causes, advance those ideas of diversity, equity, and inclusivity. And we've had numerous members from various groups, marginalized groups. But we work together. We meet once a month, and we work on trying to assist with policy, and like I said, you know, education, and, you know, putting forth an agenda that encourages growth in these areas. Does that make sense?
It does. I think it's important for people to know that you're not a group of people that are bringing punishment or judgment.
No, in fact, we're completely outside the sanctioning process, right? People can send us, if they've had an experience that's negative and they feel that they trust us, they can send it to us. But it's very probable and almost certain that if it's sent to us, we will refer it to the seneschalate for action, because the society's policies at the corporate level expressly prohibit activity that is hateful or harmful, basically, to any number of protected groups. But there are a lot of the council teaches classes on diversity, equity, and inclusion. There's also they teach bystander classes, how to be a good ally in a situation where something is occurring. but no, we're not involved in the sanction process. That's not what we do. And if people think that, it's a misunderstanding.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I was explaining to someone in another kingdom, they were interested in starting a group in their kingdom.
Mhm.
And they were afraid of putting people that would volunteer to be on the council in a position of having to make those judgments. And so I just wanted to make it clear that that is not what this is all
No,
about.
no.
It's not, that is not a risk that you take on.
I mean, you may encounter, people saying, "Well, this thing happened to me," right? Or you may encounter situations where they'll ask for advice on how to handle it, but we're not directly involved.
Right. Right. Thank you. Thank you for explaining that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Rifkin, do you have any other questions or anything you wanted to bring up with Justin?
I don't think so.
Okay. And Justin, do you have anything? Have we not talked about anything that you wanted to talk about?
Jeez. No, I don't think so. I went from pretty silly stuff when I was younger to pretty serious stuff. So nothing immediately leaps to mind. I should mention that I love my Lady Marian very much, and she's off to the side here. So,
I like that she had the book at the ready.
Oh yeah, no, she is perfectly happy to help me make a fool of myself anytime I am ready.
I don't think that's making a fool of yourself. I just think that it's just fun. That's just.
Oh, it is. I'm mocking myself, not serious. And it was fun. Dagmar was a hoot. When it was going on, and Fiat was involved as well. It was all great.
All the shenanigators.
Yeah.
Yeah. At times, and it's important to remember that fun is what this is all about.
Absolutely.
And the whole impetus behind the important work that you're doing and the hard discussions that we're having is to make sure that this game does remain fun for everybody.
Right. And, expanding the fun, right? So that people who, people who may not have found a place where they felt, welcome for any number of reasons now feel more welcome, people from who want to celebrate different cultures, and, people who, just for that matter, just want to live their lives as they are. So, yeah,
for sure. And I think it's a bare minimum thing that has to be done in the SCA in order to move forward, I think.
Well, and it makes us better. Yeah. I mean, diversity has always been one of our strengths. There are actually any number of organizations out there that do like a 50-year period of history, right? Or a particular battle, or a particular market, even, during a particular era. And we don't. Our strength has always been in our breadth. The fact that we have people who are doing, 17th, basically right at the cusp, 17th century recreation, and people who are doing Egyptian, right?
Or 450 BC.
Right, exactly. 450 BC. There you go. Yeah. Yep. Yep.
Yeah. I love that about the SCA, and I hope that other people can find the space to recreate and research cultures that they're interested in.
Yep.
100%.
Yeah, Roland's doing some really fascinating
Filipino stuff, right?
Filipino stuff.
Oh, is he really? Oh, that's
Yeah.
amazing. Oh, that's really neat.
Yeah, he just built a shield that is unbelievably cool.
Oh, wow. I'm not privy to it. So
Yeah, for some reason his posts weren't coming up in my feed, and then somebody commented on it and I saw it, and then I had to like dive down into his feed and like look at it, at the progress. Oh my God, it's cool.
Oh, wow.
You should check it out.
There are, I will, I'll definitely take a look. There are also people who are First Nations in Canada who have been doing some really amazing stuff. There's, yeah, I really loved. I really really appreciate that we're seeing this kind of thing happening. The academically, I love cultural anthropology and the seeing the material cultures of all these different societies being represented is just amazing to me. I just can't say how much I love it.
Same, and I'm really looking forward to seeing more people delve into art like that.
Absolutely.
And share their cultures. Super excited about it. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you
for your time tonight. And I'm looking for my calendar, which I have right here. Let's see, where are we? So this weekend, I am teaching at the Crown. Well, not really teaching. I'm on a Scythian discussion panel at the Crown Ithra with Attias, Raven, and Olivier from Atlantia. So that's going to be kind of fun. If you're interested in Scythian culture and you have questions, it's just going to be kind of a Q&A session.
Okay.
So what day are you doing it?
That's Saturday at, I think, 1 o'clock.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, there's a lot of really, really cool classes through the May Crown Ithra, so you guys should all check it out. And I think that their majesties are actually even having court on Saturday.
Cool. And there's going to be a new laurel made.
Oh!
So excited. And there's no pre-registration required for this Ithra, so you can just go to the Facebook page and find the link and join in any classes you want to take.
Excellent.
Yeah,
I'll definitely be taking a look.
And then Sunday, Susanna and I are going to talk about shield painting and making your shield beautiful.
Yes.
So that should be
fun. Then Monday, I think there's going to be a Grace Under Pressure interview, but I don't think we have anyone scheduled yet. If you are a consort, if you have served as a consort and a royal peer, and you are willing to be interviewed, please contact me or Duchess Dagmar or Sir Joel. We are looking for interviewees for that show. And then Tuesday on Branch of Laurels, I'm going to have Duchess Dagmar and her former apprentice, now Laurel.
Eleanor.
Nope, that's her real name.
Oh.
Yep, Eleanor.
Lisa, who has moved to Aitenveld. So it'll be a good opportunity to have her new neighbors get to know her. And then on Wednesday, Rifkin and I are interviewing Master Grendel.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, who is, he's the Forged and Fired champion, a Laurel for, he plays cello and he does knife work. He's one of Untier's very small handful of masters at arms.
This
and
is really hilarious.
Do we have more than one?
Yeah.
Two.
There's Master Timothy, Master Montford.
Oh, right. The very Montford. I forgot Montford. Yeah, that's right.
And he's a Lion of Untier. So that's what we have coming up.
Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Justin.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed it. Thank you for the opportunity to talk.
Thanks, everyone, for watching. I hope you have a good night.
See you next time.
All right.